I want to tell you something I've never told anyone before, not my friends, not my therapist, not even the detectives who came to my house that night. My daughter-in-law tried to poison me at my own birthday dinner. And if it weren't for my 6-year-old grandson's voice cutting through the candlelight and laughter, I wouldn't be here talking to you right now. But before you think this is just another family drama story, let me tell you, it gets so much worse. And so much better. Because what happened in the 10 minutes after he screamed those words didn't just save my life. It destroyed hers. Before we dive in, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching this from right now? Are you alone in your car? Lying in bed at night? Cooking dinner? Drop a comment and let me know. I read every single one. And if you've ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted, someone you loved, someone you let into your home and your heart, then you need to hear this story all the way through. Hit that subscribe button, because what I'm about to share with you is going to make you question everything you think you know about the people closest to you. And please, check the description box below. I've shared more stories like this one, stories about survival, revenge, and the kind of justice the courts don't always deliver. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. Not the night of the dinner, but the day I first met her. Her name was Jessica. I remember the first time my son brought her home. It was a Sunday in April, 7 years ago now, and the dogwoods were blooming white and pink all over our neighborhood in Durham, North Carolina. I was pulling weeds in my front garden when I heard the car pull up. I stood, brushed the dirt off my knees, and saw my son, my only child, David, step out of the passenger side. And then she emerged from the driver's seat. Jessica was tall, blonde, with one of those smiles that seemed just a little too wide. You know the kind. The kind that makes you feel like you're being studied, not greeted. She wore a yellow sundress and wedge sandals, and she walked toward me with her hand already extended, like she was running for office. "Mrs. Brennan," she said, her voice bright and smooth as honey. "I've heard so much about you. David talks about you all the time." I shook her hand. It was cold, even though it was 75 degrees outside. I noticed that. I noticed a lot of things about Jessica that day, but I pushed them down because I wanted to be fair. I wanted to be the kind of mother-in-law who didn't meddle, who didn't judge, who gave her son's girlfriend the benefit of the doubt. That was my first mistake. David was glowing. He was 32 then, a project manager at a tech firm in Raleigh, and he looked at her the way I used to look at his father before the cancer took him. Like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. I wanted that for him. God, I wanted that so badly. We sat on the back porch that afternoon. I made iced tea and brought out lemon bars I'd baked that morning. Jessica complimented everything. The house, the garden, the tea, my earrings. Everything. But none of it felt real. It felt rehearsed. Like she'd practiced in the car on the way over. "David tells me you used to be a nurse," she said, leaning forward with her elbows on her knees, her eyes locked on mine. I said. "For 33 years. Retired 5 years ago." "That's incredible," she said. "You must have seen so much pain, so much death." The way she said that last word made my skin prickle. But I smiled. I nodded. I told her a few stories about the ER, about saving lives, about the patients I still thought about. She listened with that wide smile, never blinking, never looking away. David reached over and squeezed her hand. "Isn't she amazing, Mom?" "She is," I said. And I meant it. I wanted to mean it. They got engaged 4 months later. Married 6 months after that. I tried to be happy. I bought her a beautiful bracelet as a wedding gift. I hosted the bridal shower at my house. I smiled in all the photos. But late at night, when I was alone in my bedroom with the TV on low, I'd replay little moments in my head. The way she'd corrected David in front of me. The way she'd rolled her eyes when he suggested they visit me more often. The way she'd looked at my house, my modest, paid-off, 3-bedroom ranch, with something that looked a lot like disappointment. Still, I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself she was just young, just adjusting, just nervous about being part of a new family. That was my second mistake. When they had their son, my grandson, Charlie, I thought things would get better. I thought motherhood would soften her. And for a little while, it seemed like it did. She let me babysit. She invited me over for dinners. She even called me Mom once or twice, though it always sounded strange coming out of her mouth, like a word in a language she didn't quite speak. But then, slowly, things started to shift. David started cancelling plans with me. Jessica's not feeling well, he'd say. Or, Jessica thinks it's better if we stay home tonight. I'd call, and he wouldn't answer. I'd text, and he'd reply hours later with something short and apologetic. I started seeing him less and less. And when I did see him, he looked tired. Worn down. Like something inside him was being drained away. I asked him once if everything was okay. We were standing in my driveway after a quick visit. He'd stopped by to drop off a birthday card, but he didn't come inside. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Everything's great, Mom, he said. Just busy. You know how it is. I didn't push. I should have. But I didn't. Jessica, meanwhile, got colder. She stopped pretending to like me. She stopped smiling when I walked into the room. She started making little comments, nothing I could call her out on, nothing David would believe was cruel, but sharp enough to sting. About my cooking. About my house. About the way I dressed. About how I hovered too much around Charlie. He's not a baby anymore, Margaret, she'd say with a tight smile. You don't need to watch him every second. Charlie was 3 years old. I started to feel like I was losing my son. Like she was building a wall between us, brick by brick, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I cried myself to sleep more nights than I'd like to admit. I'd sit in my kitchen with a cup of tea, staring at old photos of David as a boy, wondering where I'd gone wrong. Wondering why she hated me so much. But I never imagined she wanted me dead. Not until the night of my 68th birthday. It was Jessica's idea to throw me a birthday dinner. I know that sounds insane now, knowing what I know, but at the time, I was shocked. Shocked and, honestly, a little hopeful. Maybe she was trying. Maybe she'd realized how cold she'd been. Maybe she wanted to start over. David called me 3 weeks before my birthday. His voice sounded lighter than it had in months. Mom, Jessica wants to host a birthday dinner for you at our place, he said. She's really excited about it. She wants to make it special. I hesitated. I couldn't help it. The idea of sitting in their home, at their table, with Jessica smiling at me from across the room, it felt wrong. It felt like a trap, though I couldn't have told you why. Are you sure? I asked. I don't want to be any trouble. You're never trouble, Mom, David said, and I could hear the old warmth in his voice. The warmth I'd been missing. Please. Let us do this for you. So I said yes. I spent the next 3 weeks talking myself into believing it was genuine. Maybe Jessica had changed. Maybe becoming a mother had softened her after all. Maybe I'd been too hard on her, too suspicious, too quick to judge. I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe that. I bought a new dress for the dinner. Nothing fancy, a soft blue cotton dress with little white flowers on it. I got my hair done at the salon. I even picked up a bottle of wine to bring, though I wasn't much of a drinker. I wanted to show up looking grateful. Looking happy. The night of the dinner, I drove to their house in Carey, about 20 minutes from my place. They lived in one of those new developments, big houses with 2-car garages and perfectly manicured lawns. Jessica had always wanted to live somewhere nice. Somewhere that looked successful. I pulled into their driveway at 6:30, right on time, and sat in my car for a moment, taking a deep breath. You can do this, I told myself. It's just dinner. It's just family. David answered the door with Charlie on his hip. My grandson was 6 years old then, with dark curly hair and his father's brown eyes. He grinned when he saw me. Grandma, he shouted, and David set him down so he could run into my arms. I hugged him tight, breathing in the smell of his strawberry shampoo. Hi, sweetheart, I whispered. I missed you. I made you a card, he said, pulling back and looking up at me with those big, earnest eyes. It's on the table. I can't wait to see it, I said. David hugged me next, and for a moment, everything felt okay. He smelled like cologne and laundry detergent, and when he pulled back, he was smiling. Happy birthday, Mom, he said. Thank you, honey. Jessica appeared in the doorway to the kitchen. She was wearing a black blouse and jeans, her blonde hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. It never did. Margaret, she said. Come in. Dinner's almost ready. I followed them inside. The house smelled like roasted chicken and garlic. The dining table was set with white plates and cloth napkins, and there were candles flickering in the center. It looked beautiful. It looked like someone had put thought into it. Charlie's card was propped up against my plate. It was construction paper folded in half, with a crayon drawing of the two of us holding hands under a rainbow. Inside, in his careful, crooked handwriting, it said, "I love you, Grandma. Happy birthday." I felt my throat tighten. I pressed the card to my chest and blinked back tears. "This is perfect, Charlie," I said. "Thank you." He beamed. Jessica brought out the food: roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, a basket of rolls. It looked and smelled incredible. I complimented her, and she gave me a tight smile. "I wanted tonight to be special," she said, sitting down across from me. "You only turn 68 once." David poured wine into my glass. I noticed Jessica wasn't drinking. She never drank much. She always said it made her feel foggy. David raised his glass. "To Mom," he said. "For everything she's done for us. For being the best mother and grandmother we could ask for." I felt my eyes well up again. I clinked my glass against his, then against Charlie's cup of apple juice. Jessica raised her water glass with a thin smile. We started eating. The food was delicious. David asked me about my week, about my book club, about my garden. Charlie told me about his soccer practice. Jessica was quiet, but she smiled when she was supposed to, laughed when she was supposed to. I started to relax. I started to think maybe I'd been wrong about her. Maybe tonight really was a fresh start. After the main course, Jessica stood up. "I'll get dessert," she said. "Margaret, I made your favorite, lemon cake." I blinked. "You remembered?" "Of course," she said, and disappeared into the kitchen. David squeezed my hand across the table. "See, Mom? I told you she wanted to make tonight special." I nodded, smiling, feeling a warmth spread through my chest that I hadn't felt in years. And then Jessica came back with the cake. It was beautiful, 2 layers, covered in pale yellow frosting, with fresh lemon slices on top. She set it down in front of me, and David dimmed the lights. They sang Happy Birthday, and I blew out the candles, making a silent wish that nights like this could happen more often. Jessica cut the cake and handed me a slice. Then she poured me a cup of tea from a small white teapot she'd brought out on a tray. "I made chamomile," she said. "I know you like it after dinner." I did. I loved chamomile tea. I reached for the cup, wrapping my hands around the warmth of it, and brought it to my lips. And that's when Charlie screamed, "Don't drink that." Time stopped. I'm not being dramatic when I say that. I mean it literally felt like the air in the room froze, like the candles stopped flickering, like my heartbeat paused mid-thump. I was holding the teacup an inch from my lips, steam curling up into my face, and Charlie was on his feet, his chair knocked backward, his little face twisted in panic. "Don't drink that, Grandma," he shouted again, louder this time, his voice cracking. David's head snapped toward him. "Charlie, what?" But Charlie wasn't looking at his father. He was looking at Jessica. And the expression on his face, I'll never forget it. It was terror. Pure, unfiltered terror. Jessica's face went white. Not pale. White. Like all the blood had drained out of her in an instant. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. I set the teacup down slowly, my hands trembling. "Charlie," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" He was breathing hard, his chest heaving, his eyes darting between me and his mother. She put something in it," he said, his voice shaking. "I saw her. In the kitchen. She put something in your tea." The room went silent. David stared at his son. Then at his wife. Then at me. "Charlie," he said slowly, "what are you talking about?" Jessica laughed. It was a sharp, brittle sound, like glass breaking. "He's confused," she said quickly, too quickly. He's making things up. You know how kids are. He probably saw me add honey or..." "It wasn't honey," Charlie shouted, and his voice cracked again. Tears were streaming down his face now. "It was from the bottle. The one you told me to never touch. The one in the cabinet." Jessica's face changed. The color came back, but it wasn't a healthy flush. It was blotchy and red, creeping up her neck. "Charlie, stop it," she hissed. "You don't know what you're..." "What bottle?" David's voice was low. Dangerous. I'd never heard him sound like that before. Jessica turned to him, her eyes wide, and for a moment I saw something flicker across her face. Panic. Calculation. He's lying, she said. David, he's lying, I don't know why, but his. What? Bottle. David stood up. His chair scraped against the floor. Jessica's mouth opened and closed. She looked at me, then at David, then at Charlie. And then she did something I'll never forget as long as I live. She ran. She bolted from the dining room, her footsteps pounding down the hallway toward the kitchen. David took off after her, shouting her name. I sat frozen, my hands still trembling, staring at the teacup in front of me. The liquid inside was pale gold, innocuous, steaming gently. Charlie ran to me and wrapped his arms around my waist, sobbing into my dress. I'm sorry, Grandma, he kept saying. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Sure, I whispered, stroking his hair with shaking hands. It's okay, baby. You didn't do anything wrong. But my mind was racing. What had he seen? What had she put in my tea? And why, God, why, would she want to hurt me? I heard shouting from the kitchen. David's voice, loud and furious. Jessica's voice, high-pitched and defensive. Something shattered. Glass, maybe a plate. Charlie flinched against me. I stood up, my legs unsteady, and walked toward the kitchen with Charlie still clinging to me. When I reached the doorway, I stopped. David was holding a small brown bottle in his hand. The kind you'd get from a pharmacy. The label was torn off. Jessica was backed against the counter, her hands up, her face streaked with tears. What is this? David demanded, shaking the bottle at her. What the hell is this, Jessica? It's nothing, she said, her voice breaking. It's just something I use for. For what? He roared. What do you use this for? She didn't answer. She just stared at him, her chest heaving, her eyes wild. David turned to look at me. His face was pale, his eyes glassy with shock. Mom, he said, his voice cracking. Did you drink any of it? I shook my head. No. Charlie stopped me. He closed his eyes and let out a shaky breath. Then he turned back to Jessica, his jaw tight. I'm calling the police. No. Jessica lunged forward, grabbing his arm. David, please, don't, you don't understand. I don't understand. He ripped his arm away from her, and she stumbled backward. You tried to poison my mother. What the hell is there to understand? I wasn't trying to. She stopped, her mouth snapping shut, like she realized she'd said too much. David stared at her. You weren't trying to what? Kill her? Then what were you trying to do? She didn't answer. She just stood there, trembling, tears streaming down her face. I felt like I was watching a stranger. This woman I'd known for 7 years, the woman my son had married, the mother of my grandson, she was a stranger. And I realized, in that moment, that I'd never really known her at all. David pulled out his phone. Jessica watched him, her expression shifting from panic to something else. Something cold. Something resigned. You're going to regret this, she said quietly. David stopped, his thumb hovering over the screen. What did you just say? She looked up at him, and the tears were gone. Her face was blank. Empty. I said you're going to regret this. Is that a threat? He asked, his voice shaking with rage. She smiled. It was the strangest, most unsettling thing I'd ever seen. No, she said softly. It's a promise. And then the doorbell rang. None of us moved. The doorbell rang again, a long, insistent chime that echoed through the house. Charlie was still pressed against my side, his small body shaking. David was staring at Jessica, his phone clutched in his hand, his face pale and rigid. And Jessica, she was looking at the door with an expression I couldn't read. Almost like she'd been expecting someone. Who is that? David asked, his voice low. Jessica didn't answer. She just wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and walked past him, past me, toward the front door. David followed her, and I followed him, my heart hammering in my chest. She opened the door, and standing on the porch was a woman I'd never seen before. She was older than Jessica, maybe late 40s, early 50s, with short dark hair and a tailored grey blazer. She looked professional. Serious. She glanced at Jessica, then at David, then at me, and her expression didn't change. Mrs. Brennan, she said, looking directly at me. I nodded, confused. Yes. She reached into her bag and pulled out a badge. I'm Detective Laura Finch with the Durham Police Department. I received a call about 20 minutes ago regarding a potential incident at this address. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. A call? From who? Detective Finch's eyes flicked to Jessica. From Mrs. Walsh. Jessica. David turned to stare at his wife, his mouth hanging open. You called the police. Jessica's face was unreadable. She stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, her expression cold and detached. I had to, she said quietly. You had to. David's voice was rising again. You tried to poison my mother, and you called the police on yourself. I didn't try to poison anyone, Jessica said, her voice flat. I called because I knew you would. And I wanted to explain before you twisted everything. Detective Finch held up a hand. Let's all take a breath here. Mr. Walsh, can I come inside? David stepped aside, his face slack with shock. The detective walked in, and Jessica closed the door behind her. We all stood in the entryway, me, David, Charlie, Jessica, and this stranger with a badge, and for a moment, no one said anything. Someone want to tell me what's going on? Detective Finch asked, pulling out a small notebook. David held up the brown bottle. My wife put something in my mother's tea. My son saw her do it. I want her arrested. Detective Finch took the bottle from him carefully, holding it up to the light. And what's in this bottle, Mrs. Walsh? Jessica's jaw tightened. It's a sedative, she said. A mild one. Prescription. It's mine. A sedative. I heard my own voice, thin and shaky. You were going to drug me. Jessica finally looked at me, and for the first time that night, I saw something other than coldness in her eyes. I saw guilt. I wasn't trying to hurt you, Margaret, she said. I needed you to. To what? David snapped. To pass out? To collapse? What the hell were you trying to do? Jessica's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they looked real. I was trying to scare you, she said, her voice breaking. Both of you. The room went silent. You wanted to scare us. I whispered. She nodded, wiping at her eyes. I thought if you got sick, if something happened and I was the one to call 911, if I saved you, maybe David would finally see me the way he sees you. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. David was staring at her like he didn't recognize her. What are you talking about? Jessica let out a bitter laugh. You don't get it, do you? You've never gotten it. Ever since we got married, it's been about her. Your mother. Everything revolves around her. What she thinks. What she needs. How she feels. Her voice was rising now, cracking with anger and desperation. I thought if I could be the hero for once, if I could be the one who saved her, maybe you'd finally look at me the way you look at her. Maybe you'd finally put me first. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. This woman I'd spent 7 years trying to understand, trying to get along with, had been planning to drug me just to win my son's approval? David's voice was cold. So you were going to poison my mother to make yourself look good. It wasn't poison. Jessica shouted. It was just enough to make her feel faint, dizzy. I was going to catch her before she fell. I was going to call 911. I was going to. She stopped, her voice breaking into sobs. I just wanted you to see me, David. I just wanted to matter. Detective Finch was writing quickly in her notebook. She looked up at Jessica, her expression neutral. Mrs. Walsh, do you understand that what you're describing is still a crime? Administering a substance to someone without their knowledge or consent is assault. Even if you didn't intend to cause serious harm. Jessica's face crumpled. She sank down onto the floor, her back against the wall, and buried her face in her hands. David looked at me, his eyes red and glassy. Mom, I'm so sorry, he whispered. I had no idea. I didn't. I know, I said, my voice barely audible. I know you didn't. Detective Finch cleared her throat. Mrs. Brennan, do you wish to press charges? I looked at Jessica, sobbing on the floor. I looked at Charlie, still clinging to my side, his face buried in my dress. I looked at David, my son, my only child, standing in the wreckage of his life. And I realized something. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Yes, I said. I want to press charges. Jessica's head snapped up. She stared at me, her face streaked with tears and mascara. Margaret, please. No, I said, my voice stronger now. You tried to hurt me. You manipulated my son. You scared my grandson. And you did it all because you were jealous. I'm not going to let that go. Detective Finch nodded. Mrs. Walsh, I'm going to need you to come with me. Jessica stood slowly, her legs shaking. She looked at David one last time, her expression pleading. David, please. Don't let her do this. David didn't say anything. He just turned away. And as Detective Finch led Jessica out the door in handcuffs, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. But also, deep down, a burning, unshakable anger. Because this wasn't just about tonight. This was about 7 years of coldness, manipulation, and control. 7 years of watching my son become a shadow of himself. 7 years of being pushed out of my own family. And now, finally, I was going to do something about it. Now, if you've ever felt like you were the problem in someone else's story, like you were the villain just for existing, then you know exactly how I felt standing in that doorway. And if you want to hear what I did next, make sure you're subscribed, because this story is far from over. Check the description box below for more stories like this. Stories about betrayal, revenge, and taking back your power. Jessica was arrested that night. David and I gave our statements to Detective Finch. Charlie, bless his heart, told her everything he'd seen, how his mother had taken a brown bottle from the cabinet above the refrigerator, how she'd unscrewed the cap and tipped it into the teapot, how she'd told him earlier that week never to touch that bottle because it was grown-up medicine. The detective took notes, gentle questions, and told us we'd done the right thing. Jessica was taken to the county jail. David didn't go with her. He didn't even look at her as they put her in the back of the police car. He just stood in the driveway with his arms crisscrossed, staring at the ground, his face blank. I took Charlie home with me that night. David said he needed to be alone, needed to think, and I didn't argue. Charlie fell asleep in my guest room with his shoes still on, exhausted from crying. I sat on the edge of the bed and watched him sleep, this little boy who'd saved my life, and I felt a fierce, protective love that made my chest ache. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jessica's face, cold, calculating, desperate. I kept replaying her words in my head. I just wanted you to see me, David. As if drugging his mother was a reasonable way to earn his attention. As if I was the problem. By the time the sun came up, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to just let the legal system handle this. I wasn't going to sit back and hope that justice was served. I was going to find out everything I could about Jessica Walsh, who she really was, what she'd been hiding, and whether this was the first time she'd done something like this. Because something told me it wasn't. David called me around 10 that morning. His voice was hoarse, like he'd been crying. Mom, I'm so sorry. I don't even know what to say. You don't have to say anything, I told him. This isn't your fault. She's my wife, he said bitterly. I brought her into our lives. I didn't see what she was doing. I didn't protect you. David, listen to me. I kept my voice firm. You couldn't have known. She fooled all of us. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I'm filing for divorce. I already called a lawyer. Good, I said. That's the right thing to do. Charlie's asking for you, he said. Can I bring him by later? Of course. He's welcome here anytime. You both are. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and started making a list. I wrote down everything I knew about Jessica. Where she'd grown up, she'd told us Charlotte, North Carolina. Where she'd gone to college, she'd said UNC Chapel Hill. Where she'd worked before she met David, some marketing firm in Raleigh, she'd said, though she'd been vague about the details. I realized, as I stared at my list, that I didn't actually know much about her at all. And what I did know, I'd taken at face value. I'd never asked questions. I'd never dug deeper. That was about to change. I started with social media. I pulled up Jessica's Facebook page and scrolled back through years of posts. Most of it was typical, photos of Charlie, snapshots of dinners, inspirational quotes. But as I scrolled further back, before she'd met David, I noticed something strange. There were almost no photos of her with other people. No friends. No family. Just selfies and pictures of places she'd been, restaurants, parks, beaches. It was like she'd existed in a vacuum. I clicked on her About section. Her hometown was listed as Charlotte, but when I searched for her high school, nothing came up. No tagged photos, no mutual friends, no check-ins. I tried her college, UNC Chapel Hill. Same thing. No record of her being there, at least not publicly. I frowned. Maybe she was just private. Maybe she'd deleted old posts. But something about it felt off. I decided to go to David and Jessica's house. David had given me a key years ago, back when things were still civil, and I figured he wouldn't mind if I looked around. I needed to see that bottle. I needed to see what else she might have been hiding. The house was quiet when I let myself in. The dining table was still set from the night before, plates with half-eaten cake, the teapot still sitting in the center, the cup I'd almost drunk from still in its place. I shivered and walked past it, heading upstairs. Jessica and David's bedroom was neat and impersonal. The bed was made. The closet was organized. I opened Jessica's nightstand drawer and found nothing unusual. Hand lotion, a sleep mask, a paperback novel. I checked David's side. Same thing. I went into the bathroom. The medicine cabinet was full of the usual stuff: ibuprofen, band-aids, toothpaste. No bottles without labels. No hidden prescriptions. I was about to give up when I remembered something. David had mentioned once that they used the attic for storage. Jessica had insisted on it. She didn't like clutter, didn't want anything unnecessary taking up space in the main house. I pulled down the attic ladder and climbed up. The attic was hot and dusty, lit by a single bare bulb. There were boxes stacked against the walls, labeled in Jessica's neat handwriting. Holiday decorations. Baby clothes. David's old stuff. And then, in the far corner, I saw a box with no label. I walked over and opened it. Inside were papers. Lots of them. I pulled out the first stack and started reading. They were medical records. But not for Jessica Walsh. The name on the records was Emily Pritchard. I flipped through the pages, my heart pounding. Psychiatric evaluations. Prescriptions for antipsychotic medication. A discharge summary from a hospital in Asheville, dated 9 years ago, detailing treatment for a severe delusional episode. I kept digging. Beneath the medical records were court documents. A restraining order, filed by a woman named Karen Pritchard against Emily Pritchard, citing harassment, stalking, and threats of violence. A police report from 10 years ago describing an incident where Emily had broken into Karen's home and destroyed her belongings. And at the very bottom of the box, I found a driver's license. The photo was Jessica, but the name was Emily Pritchard. I sat back on my heels, my hands shaking. Jessica wasn't Jessica. She was Emily. She'd changed her name. She'd hidden her past. And if these records were accurate, she had a history of serious mental illness and violent behavior. David had no idea. None of us had. I pulled out my phone and took pictures of everything: the medical records, the court documents, the license. Then I carefully put everything back in the box and climbed down from the attic. I drove straight to Detective Finch's office. She listened to everything I told her, looking through the photos I'd taken on my phone. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and let out a long breath. "Mrs. Brennan," she said slowly, "this changes things significantly." "What do you mean?" I asked, though I think I already knew. "If your daughter-in-law has a documented history of psychiatric issues and violent behavior, and she didn't disclose that to anyone, not to your son, not to the court when they got married, not even on background checks if she was working in certain fields, then we're looking at more than just one incident. We're looking at a pattern of deception." She tapped her pen against the desk. "And if she changed her identity to hide that history, that's fraud. Possibly identity fraud, depending on how she did it." "Can you use this?" I asked. "In the case against her?" "Absolutely. This establishes motive, pattern of behavior, and premeditation. It shows this wasn't just a momentary lapse in judgment. She's done things like this before." She looked at me, her expression serious. "Mrs. Brennan, I need to ask you something. Do you know if Jessica, or Emily, I guess, ever had access to your personal information? Bank accounts, social security number, anything like that?" I thought about it. "I don't think so." "Why?" Because people who go to these lengths to hide their identity often have other motives. Financial gain. Control. I want to make sure she wasn't planning something bigger. A chill ran down my spine. I need to check my accounts. Do that, Detective Finch said. And let me know if you find anything unusual. In the meantime, I'm going to dig into Emily Pritchard's background and see what else we can find. I left the police station feeling both vindicated and terrified. Who was this woman my son had married? What else had she been planning? And how close had I come to being just another victim in her long history of destruction? When I got home, I immediately logged into my bank account online. Everything looked normal at first. My checking account, my savings, my small investment account that I'd built up over the years. But then I noticed something. There was a new account listed under my name. A credit card I'd never applied for. My hands started shaking as I clicked on it. The account had been opened 3 months ago. The billing address was David and Jessica's house. And there was already a balance of $15,000. $15,000 in charges I'd never made. I scrolled through the statement. Designer handbags, jewelry, electronics, furniture, all ordered online, all shipped to a P.O. box I didn't recognize. She'd stolen my identity. She'd been stealing from me for months. I called Detective Finch immediately. She told me to print everything and bring it to her office first thing in the morning. She also told me to freeze my credit and file a report with the Federal Trade Commission. I did all of that. And then I called David. Mom. He sounded worried. Is everything okay? No, I said, my voice shaking with rage. It's not. I need you to come over right now. There's something you need to see. He arrived 20 minutes later with Charlie. I sent Charlie into the living room to watch cartoons, and I sat David down at my kitchen table. I showed him everything, the photos from the attic, the medical records, the court documents, the driver's license. And then I showed him the credit card statement. He stared at the papers in front of him, his face going pale, then red, then pale again. I don't understand, he whispered. She's not even Jessica. No, I said. She's Emily Pritchard. And she's been lying to you since the day you met her. He put his head in his hands. Oh my God. Oh my God, Mom, I married a stranger. I have a child with a stranger. I know, I said softly, reaching across the table to squeeze his arm. I know, honey. What else has she done? He asked, looking up at me with red, glassy eyes. What else don't I know? I don't know yet, I said. But we're going to find out. Over the next 2 weeks, Detective Finch and I worked together to uncover the truth about Emily Pritchard, the woman who'd called herself Jessica Walsh. It turned out she'd legally changed her name 7 years ago, right before she met David. She'd petitioned the court in Mecklenburg County, claiming she wanted a fresh start after a difficult childhood. The name change was legitimate, but what she'd left out of her petition was everything else: the psychiatric hospitalizations, the restraining orders, the criminal record for theft and fraud in 2 other states. Detective Finch tracked down Karen Pritchard, Emily's sister, the one who'd filed the restraining order. Karen agreed to talk to us over the phone, and what she told us made my blood run cold. Emily has always been sick, Karen said, her voice tired and sad. Even when we were kids, she'd do things, lie, manipulate, hurt people, and then act like she was the victim. Our parents tried to get her help, but she'd always charm the therapists, convince them she was fine. By the time she was in her 20s, she'd burned through every relationship she had. Friends, boyfriends, employers. She'd get obsessed with people, and when they didn't give her what she wanted, she'd turn on them. What happened with you? I asked gently. Karen sighed. She met a man I was dating. She decided she wanted him. When he wasn't interested, she started stalking him. She'd show up at his work, his apartment, his gym. She sent him hundreds of messages. When he blocked her, she broke into my house and destroyed everything I owned. Smashed dishes, cut up my clothes, poured bleach on my carpet. That's when I got the restraining order. Did she ever hurt anyone physically? Detective Finch asked. There was a long pause. Not that I know of, Karen said. But she came close. She told me once, during one of her episodes, that she'd thought about killing me, just to see what it felt like. I felt sick. Has she contacted you recently? Detective Finch asked. No, Karen said. I haven't heard from her in almost 8 years. I didn't even know she'd changed her name. I thought maybe she'd finally gotten help. Or maybe she'd just moved on. After the call ended, I sat in Detective Finch's office, staring at the wall. She was escalating, I said quietly. Wasn't she? Detective Finch nodded. It looks that way. Stalking, theft, fraud, and now attempted poisoning. Each time, the behavior gets more severe. What if Charlie hadn't stopped me? I asked, my voice breaking. What if I'd drunk that tea? You'd probably be in the hospital right now, Detective Finch said. The sedative she used, it's prescribed for severe anxiety and insomnia. In high doses, especially combined with alcohol, it can cause respiratory failure. If you'd had a glass of wine with dinner and then drunk the tea, you could have stopped breathing. I closed my eyes. She was really trying to kill me. I think she was trying to make it look like an accident, Detective Finch said. She'd call 911, play the distraught daughter-in-law, and no one would suspect her. Especially if she'd been stealing your money and wanted you out of the way. Why didn't she just divorce David? I asked. Why go through all this? Because she's not rational, Detective Finch said. People like Emily don't think the way we do. In her mind, you were the obstacle. You were the reason David didn't worship her. If you were gone, everything would be perfect. I felt a surge of anger so strong it nearly knocked the breath out of me. This woman, this sick, twisted woman, had wormed her way into my family, married my son, given me a grandchild I loved more than life itself. And all along, she'd been planning to destroy us. Well, I wasn't going to let her. What happens now? I asked. Detective Finch leaned forward. Now we build a case. With everything we've uncovered, the identity fraud, the theft, the medical history, the prior criminal behavior, we can push for serious charges. Attempted murder, identity theft, fraud. She's looking at significant prison time. Good, I said. My voice was steady now. Cold. I want her to pay for everything she's done. She will, Detective Finch said. I promise you, Mrs. Brennan. She will. But as I drove home that evening, I realized something. The legal system was going to handle Jessica, or Emily, or whatever her real name was. But that wasn't enough for me. I wanted her to feel what I'd felt. The betrayal. The fear. The helplessness. I wanted revenge. And I was going to get it. If you've ever wanted to watch someone who hurt you finally face consequences, then you understand what I was feeling. But what I did next, well, let's just say the justice system wasn't the only kind of justice I had in mind. Stay with me, and check the description box below for more stories about people who refuse to be victims. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking I should have just let the police handle it. Let the courts do their job. Let Emily Pritchard rot in prison for what she tried to do. And believe me, part of me wanted that. The rational, law-abiding, former nurse part of me that had spent 33 years following rules and doing the right thing. But there was another part of me, a part one didn't know existed until that night, that wanted more. I wanted her to hurt. I wanted her to suffer. I wanted her to know what it felt like to lose everything, the way she'd tried to make me lose my life. So I started planning. Emily was being held on bail, $250,000. David refused to pay it, and Emily apparently had no one else to call. No family who'd take her calls. No friends who cared enough to help. She was alone in a cell, exactly where she belonged. But her arraignment was coming up. And I knew, based on what Detective Finch had told me, that there was a chance she could get out. If her lawyer was good enough. If the judge was lenient enough. If she played the victim well enough. I couldn't let that happen. I spent hours researching Emily Pritchard. I found old articles about the incidents with her sister Karen. I found a blog post from a woman named Rachel who'd worked with Emily years ago at a nonprofit in Asheville. Rachel had written about a coworker who'd stolen donations and blamed it on someone else, getting them fired. She didn't name Emily directly, but the details matched perfectly. I reached out to Rachel through the blog's contact form. She responded within a day. I didn't name her because I was scared, Rachel wrote back. She threatened me after I tried to report her. Told me she'd make sure I never worked in the nonprofit sector again. I was young and stupid, so I backed down. But I've never forgotten what she did. I asked Rachel if she'd be willing to testify or provide a statement to the police. She hesitated at first, but when I told her what Emily had done to me, what she tried to do, Rachel agreed. Someone needs to stop her, Rachel wrote. Before she actually kills someone. Detective Finch was grateful for the new information. She added Rachel's statement to the growing case file. But I didn't stop there. I started digging into Emily's finances. I knew she'd stolen $15,000 from me, but I wanted to know where that money had gone. The P.O. box listed on the credit card statement was in Raleigh, about 30 minutes from David's house. I drove there one afternoon and asked the clerk if I could find out who'd rented the box. I can't give out that information, the clerk said apologetically. Privacy laws. Even if the person renting it committed fraud? I asked. The clerk shifted uncomfortably. You'd need a warrant for that. I nodded and left. But as I walked to my car, I noticed something. The P.O. box facility was in a small strip mall, and right next to it was a pawn shop. I went inside. The man behind the counter was older, probably in his 60s, with a thick grey beard and reading glasses perched on his nose. I showed him a photo of Emily on my phone, one I'd pulled from Facebook. Have you seen this woman? I asked. He squinted at the photo. Maybe. Hard to say. We get a lot of people in here. She would have been selling jewelry, I said. High-end stuff. Designer bags. Maybe. Within the last few months. Recognition flickered in his eyes. Oh yeah. Her. Blonde lady, real chatty. She came in 4, maybe 5 times. Sold us a bunch of stuff. Nice stuff, too. I remember thinking it was weird because she didn't seem like she needed the money. You know? She was dressed nice, had a new car. Do you keep records? I asked. Of what she sold? He nodded. We're required to. For stolen goods and such. Hold on. He disappeared into a back room and came back a few minutes later with a printed ledger. He flipped through it and pointed to several entries. Here. She sold us a Cartier bracelet, a Gucci handbag, and a few other pieces. Paid her about $8,000 total. Do you still have the items? I asked, my heart pounding. Nope. Sold M. But I got photos if you need M. I need them, I said. He printed out copies of the photos and handed them to me. I recognized the bracelet immediately. It was one I'd bought for myself 20 years ago, after I'd gotten a big bonus at the hospital. I'd kept it in my jewelry box at home, and I'd noticed it was missing a few months back, but I'd assumed I'd just misplaced it. She'd stolen it. She'd stolen it from my house and sold it for cash. I thanked the pawn shop owner and left. When I got to my car, I sat in the parking lot and stared at the photos, my hands shaking with rage. Emily hadn't just tried to kill me. She'd been systematically robbing me for months. She'd been in my home, going through my things, taking whatever she wanted. And I was done being the victim. That night, I sat down at my kitchen table with a notebook and started writing. I made a list of everyone Emily had hurt. Me, David, Charlie, Karen, Rachel, probably dozens of others I didn't know about. I made a list of every crime she'd committed that I could prove. And then I made a list of every way I could make sure she never, ever hurt anyone again. Some of the ideas were legal. Some of them weren't. I decided to start with the legal ones. I contacted a lawyer David's attorney recommended, a woman named Patricia Henley who specialized in victim advocacy. I told her everything. She listened, took notes, and then looked me straight in the eye. Mrs. Brennan, she said, with everything you've uncovered, we can bury her. But I need you to promise me something. What? I asked. Don't do anything stupid. Don't try to confront her. Don't try to take matters into your own hands. Let the system work. I nodded. I promise. I lied. Because the truth was, I'd already decided what I was going to do. And it wasn't something I could tell Patricia, or Detective Finch, or even David. Emily's arraignment was scheduled for 2 weeks out. In that time, I worked with Patricia and Detective Finch to make sure every piece of evidence was airtight. We had the medical records, the identity fraud, the theft, the credit card charges, the pawn shop receipts, the statements from Karen and Rachel. We had everything. But I wanted one more thing. I wanted Emily to know that I wasn't afraid of her. That I wasn't going to disappear quietly. That I was going to be in that courtroom, staring her down, making sure she knew exactly who had destroyed her. The day of the arraignment, I wore my best dress, a navy blue sheath with a string of pearls. I did my hair and makeup. I wanted to look strong, confident, untouchable. David met me at the courthouse. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. Charlie was with David's parents. They'd flown in from Florida to help with everything. I hugged my son tightly before we went inside. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked. "You don't have to be here." "Yes, I do," I said. "I need to see her face." We walked into the courtroom together. It was smaller than I'd expected, with wooden benches and fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly. Emily was already there, sitting at a table with her public defender. She was wearing an orange jumpsuit, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked thin, tired. When she saw me, her expression changed. For just a second, I saw fear flicker across her face. Good, I thought. Be afraid. The judge entered, and we all stood. The arraignment was quick, formal charges were read, Emily pleaded not guilty, and the judge set a trial date for 3 months out. Bail was denied. Emily's lawyer tried to argue for house arrest, but Patricia stood up and calmly listed every reason why Emily was a flight risk and a danger to others. The judge agreed. As they led Emily out of the courtroom, she turned and looked at me one last time. And then she smiled. It was the same cold, empty smile she'd given David the night of my birthday. The same smile that said, "You haven't won yet." I stared back at her, my face expressionless. And in that moment, I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait 3 months for a trial. I wasn't going to let her sit in a cell, plotting, scheming, finding some way to worm out of this. I was going to end this now. I know what you're thinking again. You're thinking I went to the jail and confronted her. Or maybe you're thinking I did something violent, something dangerous. But I'm smarter than that. What I did was worse. The truth is, people like Emily, people who lie and manipulate and destroy, they're not afraid of violence. They're not even really afraid of prison. What they're afraid of is being exposed. Having everyone know who they really are. Losing control of the narrative. So that's exactly what I took from her. I started by writing a letter. Not to Emily. To everyone she'd ever known. I spent 3 days crafting it. It was 10 pages long, single-spaced, and it detailed everything. Her real name. Her psychiatric history. The restraining order. The thefts. The lies. The attempted poisoning. I included copies of the court documents, the medical records, the credit card statements. Everything. And then I found her. I found everyone who'd ever been connected to Emily Pritchard. It wasn't that hard, honestly. People leave trails, especially people who've lived in multiple states and burned bridges everywhere they went. I found her old addresses through public records. I cross-referenced those with social media. I tracked down neighbors, former co-workers, old classmates. I found the nonprofit where she'd worked in Asheville and got a list of staff members from their old newsletters. I found the hospital where she'd been treated and tracked down some of the nurses who'd been on duty during her admissions. Former colleagues of mine, actually, who were more than willing to talk once I explained the situation. I even found her parents. They were living in a retirement community in Florida. I called them, introduced myself as David's mother, and told them what their daughter had done. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "We're not surprised," her father finally said, his voice heavy with resignation. "We tried to help her for years. But Emily doesn't want help. She wants control." "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. I couldn't imagine what it was like to raise a child and watch them become a monster. "We are too," her mother said softly. "We're so sorry she hurt you." I asked if they'd be willing to provide a statement to the police. They agreed. Once I had my list of contacts, over 60 people in total, I sent the letter. I mailed physical copies to some. I emailed others. I posted a redacted version on a public blog, with enough details to be searchable but not enough to violate any privacy laws. I made sure the story was out there, everywhere, where anyone who Googled Emily Pritchard or Jessica Walsh would find it. And then I waited. The response was immediate. Former co-workers reached out to me with their own stories. A woman named Brenda told me about how Emily had sabotaged her promotion by spreading rumors that she was embezzling funds. A man named Michael told me about how Emily had tried to seduce him, and when he turned her down, she'd filed a false sexual harassment complaint against him that nearly ruined his career. One woman, whose name I'll keep private, told me that Emily had been her roommate in college. "She poisoned my cat," the woman wrote. I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, I know it was her. My cat got sick and died within a week, and the vet said it looked like antifreeze poisoning. Emily was the only other person in the apartment. I forwarded every single message to Detective Finch. The case against Emily was no longer just about me. It was about a lifetime of destruction. But the real blow came 2 weeks later. I got a call from Patricia Henley, my lawyer. Her voice was tight with suppressed excitement. "Margaret, you're not going to believe this," she said. "Emily's lawyer just contacted me. She wants to take a plea deal." My heart skipped a beat. What kind of deal? "She'll plead guilty to identity theft, fraud, and attempted assault. In exchange, the prosecution will drop the attempted murder charge. She's looking at 15 to 20 years, with the possibility of parole after 12. I was silent for a moment, processing. Why would she agree to that? Patricia laughed, a short, bitter sound. Because she knows she's going to lose at trial. With everything that's come out, with all the witnesses and evidence, there's no way a jury's going to side with her. Her lawyer knows it, and apparently, Emily finally knows it too. So it's over? I asked. Almost, Patricia said. You'll need to agree to the deal. As the primary victim, you have a say. I thought about it. 15 years. Maybe 12 with good behavior. Emily would be in her late 40s or early 50s when she got out. Still young enough to start over. Still young enough to hurt someone else. But she'd have a record. A documented history. She'd never be able to hide again. I'll agree, I said. On one condition. What's that? I want to read a victim impact statement at her sentencing. I want to look her in the eye and tell her exactly what she did to me and my family. Done, Patricia said. I'll let them know. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks later. In that time, I wrote and rewrote my statement dozens of times. I wanted it to be perfect. I wanted every word to cut her the way she tried to cut me out of David's life. The day of the hearing, the courtroom was packed. David was there, of course. So was Detective Finch. Karen Pritchard flew in from Texas. Rachel drove down from Asheville. Even a few of the people who'd reached out to me after reading my letter showed up. We all wanted to see her fall. Emily was brought in wearing the same orange jumpsuit. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her hair was greasy, her face pale. She didn't look at anyone. She just stared at the table in front of her. The judge called the hearing to order. Emily's lawyer stood and confirmed that she was pleading guilty to all charges. The judge accepted the plea and asked if anyone wanted to make a statement before sentencing. Patricia nodded at me. I stood up, my hands shaking slightly as I unfolded the paper I'd been clutching. And then I spoke. Your Honor, my name is Margaret Brennan, and I'm here today because the woman sitting in front of you tried to kill me. Emily flinched. She still didn't look up. But this isn't just about one night, I continued, my voice growing stronger. This is about 7 years of lies. 7 years of manipulation. 7 years of watching her slowly poison my relationship with my son. Not with chemicals, though she tried that too, but with cruelty, and isolation, and control. I looked directly at Emily. She finally raised her head and met my eyes. You wanted me gone, I said. You wanted me out of David's life because you couldn't stand the fact that he loved someone besides you. You couldn't stand the fact that I saw through you. That I knew, from the very beginning, that you were wrong. That something about you was broken. Tears were running down Emily's face now, but I didn't stop. You stole from me. You lied to my son. You traumatized my grandson. You put a poison in my tea and smiled at me while I almost drank it. And you did all of this because you're not just sick. You're evil. The courtroom was silent. I don't forgive you, I said, my voice shaking now with emotion. I will never forgive you. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure that everyone knows who you really are. That no one ever falls for your lies again. That no one else has to go through what my family has gone through. I folded the paper and looked at the judge. She deserves every year she's about to serve. And more. I sat down. David reached over and squeezed my hand. The judge looked at Emily. Do you have anything to say for yourself? Emily stood slowly. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I'm sorry. That's all she said. 2 words. Hollow and meaningless. The judge sentenced her to 18 years without the possibility of parole for 15. As they led her out of the courtroom, Emily looked back at me one last time. But this time, she wasn't smiling. She was broken. And I felt nothing but satisfaction. But this story doesn't end here. Because even though Emily was locked away, the damage she'd done was still there. And fixing it, healing from it, that was going to take time. More time than I realized. You'd think that once Emily was sentenced, everything would go back to normal. That we'd all just move on, relieved and grateful that she was gone. But that's not how trauma works. The first few weeks after the sentencing, I felt numb. I went through the motions, made breakfast, watered my garden, went to book club, smiled when I was supposed to. But inside, I felt hollow. Like I'd spent so much energy fighting, surviving, seeking justice, that now that it was over, I didn't know what to do with myself. David was worse. He moved back into his house, but he barely functioned. He'd call me in the middle of the night, his voice thick with tears, asking questions I couldn't answer. How did I not see it, Mom? How did I live with her for 7 years and not know who she really was? What does that say about me? It says you loved her, I'd tell him over and over. It says you trusted her. That's not a weakness, David. That's what good people do. But I don't think he believed me. Charlie started having nightmares. He'd wake up screaming, crying for me or for his dad, terrified that Mommy was going to come back. David took him to a child psychologist, a kind woman named Dr. Rosen who specialized in trauma. She said it would take time. That Charlie had witnessed something no child should ever see, and his brain was trying to process it the only way it knew how. I started seeing a therapist too. Her name was Linda, and she was in her 60s, with kind eyes and a calm voice that never felt patronizing. I told her everything, about Emily, about the poisoning, about the rage I'd felt, about the revenge I'd taken. Do you regret it? She asked me once. Sending those letters? Exposing her to everyone she'd ever known? I thought about it. No, I said. I don't regret it. Why not? Because she needed to be stopped. And I stopped her. Linda nodded slowly. And do you feel like you've stopped her? Or do you still feel like she has power over you? That question hit me harder than I expected. The truth was, even with Emily locked away, I still thought about her constantly. I still checked the news for updates on her case. I still looked at the photos from the pawn shop, the credit card statements, the medical records. I still felt the fear I'd felt that night, sitting at the dinner table with the teacup an inch from my lips. I don't know, I admitted. Then we have more work to do, Linda said gently. One afternoon, about 3 months after the sentencing, David asked if I'd come over to help him pack up Emily's things. He'd been avoiding it, leaving her closet and her drawers untouched, like touching her belongings would bring her back somehow. But he knew he couldn't keep living like that. I drove over on a Saturday morning. We worked in silence at first, pulling clothes off hangers, folding them into boxes, taping them shut. David would donate everything, he said. He didn't want any reminders. But as we worked, we found things. Things that made my skin crawl. In the back of Emily's closet, hidden behind a row of shoes, we found a notebook. It was small, leather-bound, with her handwriting inside. I opened it and started reading. It was a journal. But not a normal one. The entries were dated, going back 5 years. And they were all about me. Margaret looked at me wrong today during dinner. One entry read. She thinks she's better than me. She thinks I don't deserve David. I need to make him see that she's the problem, not me. Another entry, from 2 years ago. I saw Margaret's jewelry box today when I was at her house. She has some nice pieces. I wonder if she'd even notice if 1 or 2 went missing. And then, 6 months before my birthday, I've been researching sedatives. I need to be careful. I can't leave any evidence. But if something happened to her, if she just went to sleep and didn't wake up, David would need me. He'd finally see how much I do for him. I felt like I was going to be sick. David was reading over my shoulder, his face white. She was planning this for months, he whispered. Longer, I said, flipping through more pages. She's been obsessed with me since the beginning. We found more. Letters she'd written but never sent, to me, to David, to people I'd never heard of. Angry, rambling letters full of paranoia and delusion. We found newspaper clippings about poisonings and unsolved deaths. We found printouts of my bank statements, my social security number, my medical records. She'd been stalking me. For years. David sank onto the floor, his head in his hands. I brought her into your life, he said, his voice breaking. I put you in danger. I knelt beside him and wrapped my arms around him. No, I said firmly. She did this. Not you. You didn't know. You couldn't have known. But I wondered, deep down, if that was true. If maybe, on some level, he had known something was wrong. If maybe we all had. And we'd just chosen to ignore it because confronting it was too hard. We called Detective Finch and turned over everything we'd found. She added it to Emily's file, though she said it wouldn't change anything. Emily was already serving her sentence, and these were just more pieces of evidence of what we already knew. But for me, seeing those journals, those letters, those clippings, it changed something. It made me realize that Emily hadn't just wanted to hurt me. She'd wanted to erase me. To make me disappear so completely that it was like I'd never existed. And I'd almost let her. I started, slowly, to reclaim my life. I went back to volunteering at the hospital, something I'd stopped doing after Emily came into our lives because she'd always made snide comments about it. You're retired, Margaret. Don't you think it's time to let the younger nurses do their jobs? I joined a painting class at the community center. I'd always loved art but had never made time for it. I traveled. I took a trip to Savannah with 2 friends from book club. Then a trip to Colorado to visit an old nursing school friend. I went places and did things without asking anyone's permission, without worrying if someone would be upset that I wasn't available. I started to feel like myself again. David started to heal too, though it was slower. He threw himself into therapy and into being a father. He and Charlie went on a road trip together, just the 2 of them, up the coast to Maine. They sent me pictures, David grinning in front of a lighthouse, Charlie holding up a lobster with both hands, both of them looking happier than I'd seen them in years. When they came back, David seemed lighter. He told me they'd talked a lot during the trip, about Emily, about what had happened, about how to move forward. Charlie asked me if he's ever going to see his mom again, David said. I told him the truth. That she's going to be gone for a very long time. And that it's okay to feel sad about that, even though what she did was wrong. What did he say? I asked. David smiled, though his eyes were wet. He said, That's okay, Dad. I have you and Grandma. That's enough. I cried when he told me that. We were healing. Slowly, painfully, but we were healing. But there was one more thing I needed to do. One more piece of closure I needed before I could truly let go. I needed to confront Emily one last time. Not because I wanted to hear her apology. I knew it would be meaningless. Not because I needed her to understand what she'd done. People like her never truly understood. But because I needed to look her in the eye and tell her that she'd failed. That despite everything she'd done, despite all her planning and plotting and poisoning, I was still here. And she was the one who'd disappeared. Linda, my therapist, wasn't sure it was a good idea. What do you hope to gain from this? She asked me during one of our sessions. Closure, I said. I need to close this chapter. Really close it. And you think seeing her will do that? I nodded. I think it will. Linda was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Just promise me you'll be careful. Don't let her manipulate you. Don't give her that power. I won't, I said. I arranged the visit through Detective Finch. Emily was being held at the North Carolina Correctional Institution for Women in Raleigh. I filled out the paperwork, went through the background check, and was approved for a 30-minute visit. The day I went, I dressed carefully. I wore a cream-colored blouse and black slacks, simple pearl earrings, and a little bit of makeup. I wanted to look put together. Strong. Alive. The prison was exactly what you'd expect. Gray concrete walls, barbed wire fences, guards with expressionless faces. I was led through a series of locked doors, metal detectors, and checkpoints before finally being brought to a small visiting room with a table and 2 chairs. And then they brought her in. Emily looked different. Her blonde hair had grown out, showing dark roots. She'd lost weight, and her face had a gaunt, hollow quality. She was wearing a standard-issue prison uniform, gray pants and a gray shirt. No makeup. No jewelry. No mask. She looked like exactly what she was, a prisoner. When she saw me, something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe. Or fear. She sat down across from me, her hands folded on the table. A guard stood by the door, watching. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, Emily broke the silence. I didn't think you'd come. Neither did I said. But I needed to see you. One last time. She nodded slowly. To gloat. I almost laughed. No. To tell you goodbye. She looked confused. Goodbye. Yes, I said. Because after today, I'm never going to think about you again. I'm going to go home, and I'm going to live my life, and you're going to disappear from it completely. Like you never existed. Her jaw tightened. That's not true. You're here, aren't you? You came all this way. You're still thinking about me. Today I am, I said calmly. But after today, you're nothing. You're just a story I'll tell sometimes. A cautionary tale. But you're not real to me anymore. You're not a person I care about or think about or even hate. You're just gone. She stared at me, her eyes shining with unshed tears. I never meant to hurt you, she whispered. Yes, you did, I said. You planned it for months. You stole from me. You drugged me. You tried to kill me. And you did it all because you're sick and broken and you couldn't stand that my son loved me. I loved him too, she said, her voice cracking. I loved him so much. No, I said firmly. You didn't love him. You owned him. You controlled him. You isolated him. That's not love. That's possession. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face now. You don't understand. You never understood. You had him first. You had all those years with him, all that history. I was just trying to have something that was mine. So you tried to take me away from him, I said. You tried to erase me. I just wanted him to need me, she shouted, her voice echoing off the walls. The guard took a step forward, but I held up my hand. It was okay. I wasn't afraid. He did need you, I said quietly. He loved you. He married you. He had a child with you. But that wasn't enough for you, was it? Because you're not capable of being satisfied. You're not capable of real love. You're only capable of consuming people until there's nothing left. Emily buried her face in her hands, sobbing. I watched her for a moment, feeling nothing. No pity. No anger. Just emptiness. I have a question for you, I said. She looked up, her face blotchy and wet. Was any of it real? Did you ever actually care about David? About Charlie? She hesitated. Then she said, in a small voice, I tried to. I really did. But it was like there was this wall inside me. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get through it. I couldn't feel what I was supposed to feel. Then you never should have married him, I said. You never should have had a child. You should have gotten help. I did get help, she said bitterly. 4 years. Medication, therapy, everything. It didn't work. Nothing worked. Then you should have stayed away from people, I said. You should have protected them from yourself. She didn't respond. I stood up. I'm done here. Margaret, wait. I looked down at her. What? Will you? She swallowed hard. Will you tell David that I'm sorry? And Charlie? No, I said. If you want to tell them, you can write them a letter. But I'm not your messenger. And honestly, Emily, they don't want to hear from you. You're dead to them. Just like you're dead to me. I turned and walked to the door. The guard opened it for me. Margaret. Emily called out, her voice desperate. I paused but didn't turn around. I hope you rot in here, I said quietly. I hope every day feels like a year. And I hope you never forget what you did. Because we won't. And then I walked out. I didn't look back. The drive home felt longer than the drive there. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, analyzing every word, every expression. But by the time I pulled into my driveway, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. I'd looked evil in the face. I'd stood my ground. And I'd walked away. That night, I called David and told him about the visit. He listened quietly, and when I finished, he said, "Are you okay, Mom?" "I am," I said. And I meant it. I really am. "Good," he said. "Because Charlie wants to know if you'll come to his soccer game tomorrow." I smiled. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Life went on. Charlie thrived. He made friends, excelled in school, and slowly, the nightmares faded. He stopped asking about Emily. She became a ghost, a shadow, something that had happened but wasn't happening anymore. David started dating again, carefully, slowly, with a lot of therapy and a lot of caution. He never introduced anyone to Charlie unless he was serious about them. And when he finally did, about 2 years later, she was nothing like Emily. Her name was Rachel, a different Rachel, not the one from Asheville, and she was a teacher, warm and genuine and kind. She didn't smile too much. She asked questions and actually listened to the answers. And when I met her, I didn't feel that prickle of unease. I felt hope. As for me, I kept living. I kept volunteering, painting, traveling. I wrote a book, a memoir about what had happened, about how to recognize the warning signs of people like Emily, about how to survive when someone you trust tries to destroy you. It was published by a small press and didn't sell a ton of copies, but the people who read it told me it saved them. That it helped them see what they'd been missing in their own relationships. And that was enough. 5 years after Emily was sentenced, I got a letter in the mail. It was from the prison. Emily had died. Heart attack, they said. She was only 43. I stared at the letter for a long time, waiting to feel something. Sadness. Relief. Satisfaction. But I felt nothing. She was just a name on a page. A person who'd once existed and now didn't. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. And then I went outside to work in my garden. Because life, real life, was happening all around me. And I wasn't going to waste another second of it on a ghost. 3 years after Emily's death, David asked Rachel to marry him. They'd been together for 5 years by then, longer than he and Emily had been together before they got married. And this time, he'd done everything right. He'd gone slow. He'd introduced her to Charlie carefully, giving them time to bond. He'd brought her around me gradually, letting me get to know her without any pressure. And Rachel was wonderful. She taught 3rd grade at a public school in Durham. She loved hiking and baking and terrible reality TV shows. She laughed easily and cried during Pixar movies and wasn't afraid to admit when she didn't know something. She was real in a way Emily never had been. When David called to tell me they were engaged, I heard the happiness in his voice, but I also heard the uncertainty. "Mom, are you okay with this?" he asked. "I know it's been a while, but if you need more time, if you're not comfortable, I can." "David," I interrupted. "I love Rachel. I'm thrilled for you. For both of you." I heard him exhale, relief flooding through the phone. "Really?" "Really," I said. "She's nothing like Emily. You know that, right?" "I do," he said. "But sometimes I still get scared. Like what if I'm wrong again? What if I'm missing something?" "You're not," I said gently. "But even if you were, you're stronger now. We all are. And we'd figure it out together." The wedding was in October, at a small vineyard just outside of Chapel Hill. It was beautiful, golden leaves, crisp air, rows of grapevines glowing in the autumn sun. There were about 50 guests, mostly family and close friends. Charlie was the ring bearer. He was 11 years old now, tall and gangly with braces and his father's smile. He took his job very seriously, walking down the aisle with the rings on a little velvet pillow, his face solemn and focused. I sat in the front row, wearing a lavender dress and a corsage of white roses. As I watched David and Rachel exchange vows, I felt tears streaming down my face. But they weren't sad tears. They were grateful tears. Grateful that my son had survived. That he'd healed. That he'd found love again, real love, the kind that didn't consume or control or destroy. Grateful that Charlie had a chance at a normal life, with a mother figure who genuinely cared about him. Grateful that I was here to see it. During the reception, David pulled me aside. We stood at the edge of the vineyard, looking out over the rows of vines, the sun setting in streaks of orange and pink. "Thank you, Mom," he said quietly. "For what?" "For everything. For saving me. For not giving up on me, even when I couldn't see what was happening." I took his hand. "You don't need to thank me. That's what mothers do." "No," he said, shaking his head. "Not all mothers. Some mothers would have walked away. Would have said, 'You made your bed, now lie in it.' But you didn't. You fought for me. For Charlie. You fought for all of us." I squeezed his hand, my throat tight with emotion. "I'd do it again. 1,000 times over. He hugged me then, and I held him tight, my baby boy, my only child, this man who'd been through hell and come out the other side. I'm proud of you, I whispered. I'm proud of you too, Mom, he said. Later that night, during the dancing, Rachel came over and sat beside me. She was glowing, her cheeks flushed from champagne and happiness. Thank you for welcoming me into your family, she said. I know it couldn't have been easy, after everything that happened. You made it easy, I said. You're good for him. For both of them. She smiled. I love them. So much. And I promise, Margaret, I'll take care of them. I'll never hurt them. I know, I said. And I meant it. As I watched David and Rachel dance, Charlie spinning around them in circles, I thought about Emily. About how close she'd come to destroying everything. About how much we'd lost because of her. But also about how much we'd gained. We'd gained strength. Resilience. The knowledge that we could survive the unthinkable. That we could rebuild. That love, real, honest, unconditional love, was stronger than hate. And maybe that was the greatest revenge of all. Not that Emily was dead or imprisoned or forgotten. But that we were here. Living. Thriving. That we'd won. This past August, I turned 75. And David and Rachel threw me a birthday dinner. When David called to tell me, my first instinct was panic. My chest tightened, and for a moment, I was back in that dining room 7 years ago, staring at the teacup, hearing Charlie scream, "Don't drink that." But then I took a breath. I reminded myself that Emily was gone. That she'd been gone for years. That this was different. Mom. David said, his voice concerned. Are you there? I'm here, I said. Sorry, yes. I'd love that. Thank you. Are you sure? He asked. We can do something else if you'd rather. Lunch out, maybe, or... No, I said firmly. A dinner sounds perfect. Because it did. Because I refused to let Emily's ghost steal another moment from me. The dinner was at David and Rachel's new house, a beautiful 2-story colonial in a quiet neighborhood with a big backyard where Charlie and his friends could play. They'd moved there a year after the wedding, and every time I visited, I felt a sense of peace. This house wasn't tainted. It didn't have Emily's fingerprints on it. I arrived at 6, wearing a yellow sundress and carrying a bottle of wine that I actually planned to drink this time. Rachel answered the door with a hug, and the smell of roasted garlic and fresh bread wafted out from the kitchen. Happy birthday, she said, beaming. Come in, come in. Charlie ran up and hugged me around the waist. He was 13 now, taller than me, with David's dark hair and a smattering of freckles across his nose. Hey, Grandma, he said. I made you a cardigan. It's on the table. I can't wait to see it, I said, ruffling his hair. The dining room was decorated simply. A vase of sunflowers in the center of the table, cloth napkins, good china. Nothing too fancy. Nothing that felt like it was trying too hard. Charlie's card was propped against my plate. It was still construction paper, but this time the drawing was more sophisticated, a watercolor of the two of us sitting on a porch swing. Inside, it said, Happy birthday, Grandma. Thanks for always being there. Love, Charlie. I pressed it to my chest, tears pricking my eyes. Don't cry, Charlie said, looking embarrassed. It's just a card. It's not just a card, I said. It's perfect. We sat down to eat. Rachel had made pot roast with roasted vegetables and mashed potatoes. David poured wine for the adults and lemonade for Charlie. And as we ate, we talked. About Charlie's upcoming school year, about Rachel's new curriculum plans, about a trip David was planning for the three of them to the Grand Canyon. It felt normal. Easy. Safe. After dinner, Rachel brought out a cake, chocolate with vanilla frosting, my favorite. They sang Happy Birthday, and I blew out the candles, making a wish. I wished for more nights like this. Rachel cut the cake, and as she handed me a slice, I noticed her hand was shaking slightly. Are you okay? I asked quietly. She glanced at David, who gave her a small nod. Then she looked back at me, her eyes shining. Margaret, we wanted to tell you something, she said. We found out last week. My heart skipped. Tell me what? Rachel's smile broke wide open. I'm pregnant. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just stared at her, then at David, then back at her. You're having a baby. She nodded, laughing now, tears streaming down her face. I'm due in March. I stood up so fast my chair nearly tipped over. I pulled Rachel into a hug, then David, then Rachel again. Oh my God, I kept saying. Oh my God, this is wonderful. This is. I couldn't finish. I was crying too hard. Charlie was grinning. I'm going to be a big brother, he said proudly. I hugged him too. You're going to be an amazing big brother. We spent the rest of the evening talking about the baby, names they were considering, how they'd decorate the nursery, what Charlie thought about having a little sibling. It was joyful and chaotic and everything a family celebration should be. As I drove home that night, my heart felt full in a way it hadn't in years. Maybe ever. Because this was what Emily had tried to take from us. This. Joy. Connection. The simple, profound beauty of being a family. And she'd failed. We were still here. Still loving each other. Still celebrating birthdays and new beginnings and second chances. And in March, I held my second grandchild for the first time. A baby girl with Rachel's green eyes and David's dark hair. They named her Sophie Margaret. When David told me the name, I cried. Again. We wanted to honor you, he said. For everything you've been through. Everything you've done for us. I looked down at Sophie, sleeping peacefully in my arms, her tiny fingers curled around my thumb. And I thought about how far we'd all come. From that night 7 years ago, sitting at a dinner table with poison in a teacup, to this moment, holding new life, new hope. Emily had wanted to destroy us. She'd wanted to tear our family apart, to erase me, to consume David and Charlie until there was nothing left. But she hadn't. She couldn't. Because love, real love, the kind that doesn't manipulate or control or destroy, is stronger than anything. Stronger than hate. Stronger than fear. Stronger than poison. And that's the truth I want you to take away from this story. If you've been betrayed by someone you trusted, if you've survived something you didn't think you could survive, if you felt like the world was trying to break you, you're still here. You're still standing. You're still capable of love and joy and beautiful new beginnings. Don't let the people who hurt you steal that from you. Don't let them win. Because the greatest revenge isn't destruction. It's living well. It's thriving. It's looking back at the wreckage and saying, you tried to break me, and I'm still here. I'm 75 years old now. I've been through more than I ever thought I could survive. I've stared death in the face. I've faced evil. I've lost things I can never get back. But I'm still here. And I'm happy. That's my revenge. That's my victory. I'm still here, and I'm happy. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, if it helped you in any way, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And check the description box below. I've shared more stories like this one, stories about survival, strength, and the kind of justice that comes from refusing to be a victim. Leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Let me know if you've ever had to fight for your life, your family, your peace. Let me know you're still here too. Because we're all still here. And that's something to celebrate.